Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Alphacool Eiswolf GPX Pro. Now it's probably going to be easier if I go into a lot more details when we come in to actually see what's inside of the box. These are predominantly at the moment for GTX 1070 and 1080 graphics cards, and by that I mean all of them because they are all going to get covered. You'll understand why when we get in the box. But there will be other models coming as well, so it's going to be something you'll be able to keep an eye on because it's likely to evolve quite quickly as they have done with their other passive blocks. But so getting straight on with getting all the parts out of the box, this is how it's going to arrive. So I'm just taking it all out so that we can have a good look. Okay, there's nothing else in there, so there we go. Okay, so first things first, the easy things to look at are the fans, and it does come with a pair of fans, and they are the Eiswolf 12s because they're 120mm fans, all black, braided, PWM. I actually don't know the specs of the fan specifically, it's not anywhere on the actual box. I will look that up and we will cover it later in the video. We have the back plate for the graphics card. I've got a kit for the GTX 1070 reference. Oh, come on, yes! Right, so we have a back plate there. As you can see, GPX 1080/70 Pro, so it does the 70 and the 80. You have the mounting kit. There is a PWM splitter, and you've got all the pads and stuff that are in there as well. We'll get the desk clear. Keep that to one side. Right, we've got the instruction manual explaining about what's going on, but I will talk to you about that. We have the destructions, as my mum would call it. We'll put everything to the side. Right. So, now we are getting down to the nitty gritty. So what I can tell you is we have the passive block here for the 1080, and you do have to fit thermal pads and stuff to it. We have the cooling plate here, which goes onto the actual GPU itself, but just inside it will pick up and cool some of the actual passive block as well. And the purpose of that is you've then got some water cooling onto the passive block, so that actually, it's like the corners up here will be touching, and it means that it can help keep the rest of this cool, so it's actually better. But what you can see is that this is really quite thick. It's not a cheap, flimsy passive block. There's a lot of weight to it, and this is where it gets cool and complicated. What you can do is you can just buy this passive block here, which comes off onto the fittings, which can be taken off quite easily without any mess. So there we go. There's a little dribble there, so you wouldn't necessarily want to have that around a live system. And you want to try and keep it covered up as well. But so you can just buy this block, and like I said, this one's for the reference ones, but there will be models for like for instance the Strix and the MSI Gamings for the 1080s and 1070s, but there will be other models that will come as well. So if you wanted to just buy this, the pump is built into this part, and that's why we have a power header that comes off, and then you can buy Radiator separately. This comes as a kit, and it comes with a 120mm rad, but if you did buy them separately, you can actually upgrade this to a 240, a 280, or even a 360. But the cool thing actually is you can actually add it in to the Eisbear kits. Because as you can see here, this is one that I've got through that I've got to work on later on. You can see that the connectors can be added in, so you can, it would help if you add it in shot, Tom. You can see the connector here, so you could add this in to your water cooling loop. So if you wanted to, you could have this added in and have a 360 in there as well. The connectors are quite clunky, but if you're one of those people that doesn't necessarily want a massive window, or doesn't mind the look, or likes the industrial look even, then you could have a CPU and GPU loop where you don't actually need to get your hands wet. Or you could just use it if you're a little bit more proficient. You could use this with the fact that your CPU and your GPU can actually have your pumps built in, so that you can get dirty a little bit more that way. So you could change the hoses if you wanted to. There's lots and lots of options anyway. But 120mm rad for your GPU. We can see that it's quite a decent thickness here as well. 45mm thick to be exact, and it does come with 2 fans, as I've said, so push pull. So if you wanted to think about it, you would need 95mm of room in total if you were to run both fans. So that's something to keep in mind. Where it is only a 120mm rad, it does mean it's quite easy to get fitted, because most cases have got a 120mm fan mount at the back of the case, so you could run it as an intake or an exhaust up there. You will have to keep in mind about the way you fit it, depending on where you want the end tanks, because you do have to allow for this extra space. Front of the case is normally the safest place to put it if you are worried about the end tanks. The one thing that I would say as well is, if you run the end tanks with the hoses at the top, it does mean that you can end up sucking the air around all the time, because the air will always sit up here. But it really depends. It doesn't really matter that much. So we've got it. We'll get it fitted. To use the guide, I would just work your way through it, just slowly and carefully. Have a look where you need to place the thermal tabs. Just work through it basically. I could spend another half an hour making a video just about where to put the pads and stuff, but I'm pretty sure that if you read this and take your time, you'll be able to get through it slowly. But if you do get stuck, pop onto the OC3D forums and we'll help you work your way through it. Okay then peeps, so as I've explained, I've got the reference 1080 model here, which I've used and I've mounted and I've fitted. With the temperatures, you can kind of use those as a ballpark figure for the kind of stuff that you're going to be, sort of results that you may get with yours. With the 1070, you may get something slightly lower. The difference between the cards themselves, so for argument's sake, if you've got an Asus Strix or the MSI Gaming or something like that, you can also pretty much give yourself a rough idea of what we've got. Also, since I did the original part of the filming, I have had a 240mm and a 280mm add-on radiator turn up. So I've done both the normal 120mm, what I'll call thick rad that comes with the kit, and I've done a couple of the upgrades as well. I'll explain to you about the 360 option in a little bit. But anyway, so to give you an idea about temperatures, a Asus Strix 1080 is 70 degrees max. It's probably one of the better air-cooled coolers that is on the market at the moment. The reason why I'm giving you the Strix rather than the normal kind of 1080 reference is they are designed to keep themselves quiet and overclock, and you can set a temperature limit. So unless you actually set a manual fan profile, you'll never know. So out the box, it's very difficult. So that's why I gave you the Asus as a ballpark. Now, we've obviously got a couple of variables. We have the fans, and these go up to 1700 RPM. And then we have the pump, which can go to 2300 RPM. So what I did is just out the box, I set the fans on the 120 radiator to 750 RPM, and that was both, so it was push-pull, 750 RPM. And then I set the pump to 1000 RPM. And with that, I got 49 degrees as a maximum temperature for the core. Now, I know people, because of the passive nature of this, are going to be asking about the MOSFET temperatures, but with the reference cards, you just don't get a MOSFET temperature anyway. And even with some of the aftermarket cards, you don't get it. The actual heatsink itself does get warm to touch. I wouldn't say it's necessarily hot, but if it's getting warm, then it's doing its job, because that's how the passive nature of it works. If I was then to turn the pump up, excuse me, to max chat, it went from 49, and it did bring it down a bit to 47.5. And then because of the passive nature of it, I did try a test with having a 120mm fan, because I had the case on its side, 120mm fan blowing at the side, and then that brought that down to 44. So with the low fans on the radiator, a fan aimed at the cooler itself did actually help to bring the core temperatures down. Now I did that just for the sake of having the result, and out of curiosity. I don't necessarily think you should be buying something like this and then adding extra fans in all over the place. And that fan I had running at 1500 RPM as well, so it starts to increase noise, and you do have to play a bit of a balancing act where, you know, just hankering for absolutely lowest temps might necessarily be the best route for everyone. It certainly wouldn't be the best thing for me, because I like a nice quiet rig anyway, and it also ends up starting to look messy and the like as well. Then what I did is I put the fans up to 1500 RPM on this, so it wasn't quite max but near enough, and then they fell from 49 degrees and they came down to 41, which I thought was pretty damn good. So that was all available with that. But don't forget, you had 2 fans at 1500 RPM on that. So it wasn't, I'm not going to say it was particularly noisy, but at the same time it wasn't quiet. It was very easily audible. If you were well into a game with cans on and stuff, you probably wouldn't have picked it up. But anybody else would have done. So anyway, so then what I did is I dropped the 240 in. And we've obviously got the nature of the connectors, we can unplug them. One thing I would say is have a bit of tissue paper near it, because you will get a little dribble of water. The other thing to consider with that as well is you get a little dribble of water. That means that water has come out of the loop, which means some air has gone in. So it's not the type of thing that you want to be disconnecting and reconnecting all the time. It's the type of thing that I would say decide what you're going to do and then stick to it, not keep changing rads out and stuff all over the place, because that air will eventually build up. With that, and these fans I set to 750 RPM again, so we'll compare it to the original result. So the original result, 750 RPM, 2 fans, obviously 2 fans on this as well. I didn't do push to pull. So we went from 49, by adding the 240 radiator, it brought our temps down to 44 and really low. I didn't bother running the 1500 RPM ones because we've already like absolutely plummeted the temps. So you do get a nice boost with the 240mm radiator, but the most important thing is you got a nice boost without having to have the extra noise. You've obviously got that extra amount that you could set a fan profile if you want. The complicating thing is when it comes to fan profiles is you do need to have something to attach the fan profile to, and it's normally the CPU, because there's not been a really good way of passing through the GPU core temperature into the fan, you know, software and stuff. I was using the new Asus stuff because on my GPU test rig we've got the Asus X99 Strix fitted, so I was just using the software within that, and you know, I could go in and select a fan speed RPM, and it makes my life really easy, because you can even use the fan profile and it finds out exactly what the minimum and maximum of the fans are and stuff. So that's how I was able to set them. I did mention about the 360. With the 360, if you were to add it to this, you probably would drop your temps a little bit. But what I would say is with the bigger radiators, it's about being able to run lower fan speeds and get in. Yes, you might get slightly better temps, but even if you got the same temps but at a considerably lower fan speed, that would be the goal for me, because then you're going to have a quieter system. but with the same sort of temperatures. So that for me would be where it would win out. Also, the 360 is a great kind of add-on to something like the AIO here. Obviously, you can have a 240, and this comes with a 240. You can have a 240 and another 240, and they'll all link up fine, brilliant. But you can buy just the block and the pump individually, and that would be at the point when I would be thinking about, you know, do you want to get yourself a 240? Do you get a 360 and lump it all in? There are a lot of options. And moving into we're already kind of concluding, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the Eiswolf the OC3D Innovation Award. There are a couple of caveats though, and I think a lot of people are probably already kind of shouting at me already. The hoses, I do think, are a little bit too long. You can obviously shorten them if you want, because you can take it all apart, but then you're letting air in the system. So what they've done is they've tried to come up with the best of a situation for everyone, and for ease of use, the fact that you can take a radiator off and plug a radiator in and connect it to a CPU loop, all that sort of stuff. It is, you know, it is kind of cool, but it does end up being quite ugly. The metal springs around the hoses, I get they're there to stop them being folded, but it, you know, and the big clunky connectors, I get why they're there. It's because it makes them easy to use. I don't think it looks particularly pretty though. So I think if I was going to go down this route, I actually do like the fact that you've got a sort of AIO pump built into the GPU block, and you can get one for a CPU block as well. So I've got a system that I'm going to be joining the two up on, but going with custom hose in another video. So, you know, I do get it. I understand that it can be great for a beginner, someone that's a bit nervous. You know, you can kind of get in, that's brilliant. The other thing that you need to kind of consider as well is if you did want to change a graphics card at a later date, you can buy just the GPX block and then change your AIO pump section into it, so you have got an upgrade path as well, and that still keeps your sealed loop. So, you know, there are some really good ideas behind it. It might not be for the old school or, you know, perfectionist water cooling aficionado, but it is bringing it, you know, down to a level where it can be more accessible for people that may have been nervous about this sort of thing in the past. If you were nervous about it, I think the only other thing that you would be worried about would be mounting the GPU block. And all I would say is just take your time, check everything, make sure you peel both sides of the plastic off of the thermal pads, because there's one on one side that's thick, there's another one on the other side that's thin, so you need to make sure you get both of those off. And just double check everything. Take pictures as you're going along, and if it had thermal pads where on the stock graphics card, it's most definitely going to need thermal pads on this one, you know, on the aftermarket one. With these ones though, they might get you to put some thermal pads in extra places as well, and those extra places can be to help cooling, and they can also be to aid insulation so you don't get shorts. So just follow the guide that you get in the box, the instructions, and like I said, just take time. And if you do get a little bit worried about it, all you need to do is go and ask on a forums like the OC3D forums, and if you take pictures and post them up onto the forum so people can actually see, you make it clear, because sometimes text, trying to get your own thoughts across, can be a little bit vague, because you can see it in front of you, but you need to be very, very descriptive. So pictures can, as they say, speak 1,000 words. So then I'm sure either the OC3D forums or whatever forums you decide to use will decide, you know, they'll be able to help work you through it. But yes, so that is my thoughts. Innovation Award. Not necessarily for the hardened water cooling enthusiast, but it is bringing it into a new market. But I would say I'm an old school hardened water cooling enthusiast, and as I've said, I can see a use for these type of things, because in the fractal thing that I'm going to do, it's not going to have a reservoir, and there's not really anywhere that I can put an external pump. So having the pumps in the blocks actually then means I can get away with less hosing and stuff as well. So that will be kind of interesting. But yes, as far as this stuff's concerned, is it for you? Is this the type of thing that you can see in your rig? If you think it's messy, I get it. Do you know what I mean? We don't need to go round anymore. But are you a beginner where this could be the type of thing that is going to get you into water cooling? And if it gets you over that initial step, I think that could be a good thing, because we all have to start I don't want to say PC Master Race journey somewhere, because if you've got a PC, you're already a member of the PC Master Race. But this is kind of going from level 1 PC Master Race up to level 2. And then once you get to the, you know, bending your own hose and painting bits and chopping bits out, you know, that's when you're almost getting your PC Master Race degree. But for one, what are you on about, Tom? What you on about? I need a mirror. Anyway, this is Tiny Tom Logan with another video for you. Out. Ding.